Damn.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another list video with Eric. There was 1 week without an Eric video, and there was a comment that was just like, no Eric video this week with a sad face. So, Eric isn't like me, and also Eric isn't like Travis and Bryn, where we can meet up every week. So, Eric videos won't be all the time, but I do promise that I will try to keep them as like steadily as we can as we keep it going.
I'm gonna try and wear out the novelty.
Yeah, we're gonna turn new player into boo player.
Yeah, ooh, that's a good one.
The player that you boo when they show up. Actually, Eric and I we've played the first 4 scenarios of Dunwich. So Eric isn't even a new player anymore. Eric is an enfranchised, knows every card, but like the back of their hand.
I have an opinion about trains now.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah. But this one, though, is we're going to do the 5 investigators that Eric is most intimidated by for various reasons that I'm excited to dive into here. And likewise, if you have any ideas for videos that you want to see Eric do, please let me know. Don't mind Russ if you hear any weird noises. It's just Russ rubbing his face against the outlet over here.
Electric cat.
Yeah, so for some further context, Eric has been playing Stella through Dunwich, and has been having a great time. I think you said that you love Stella.
I'm increasingly in love with Stella, and I'm worried that I'm going to get so addicted to being able to just fail a skill test for fun and profit.
It is a drug that a lot of people actually have a hard time kind of just like realizing the changes. Like, oh, I don't just have a test I can get rid of. I see what you're trying to do.
And Justin also helped me to build Stella into just a monster with these 2 quick learners.
Yes.
That I also took. So, yeah, I would like to say that I'm not a new player anymore, but I'm also not an expert player. I am a Stella player.
Yeah. But I think in the grand scheme of things, Eric's is still very new. I don't think you're like a non-new Arkham player.
No.
Until you've probably have played, I'm gonna say like 6 campaigns, because there's a lot to learn in this game, and it's gonna just like, because like you've also only played the survivor class.
It's true.
There's still 4 other classes and like 50 other investigators that all play somewhat, if not exceptionally differently. So that's my segue into these ones that might be low on your list, but they also, I know Eric likes challenging themselves, so they also might be higher on the list than we previously expected. So we'll start with our number 5 for the 5th most intimidating investigator. I made the joke, the investigator that if Eric ran into an alleyway would run away from. And that is Parallel Agnes Baker. So this is an 8/6, 8 damage, 6 horror. I'm pretty sure it's the same stat line as regular Agnes. And the ability is that when you cast a spell, you can take a damage to reduce its cost by 2, and if you do, you shuffle it into your deck instead of discarding it. So what makes Parallel Agnes intimidating for you?
So Parallel Agnes intimidates me because as someone who traditionally is like mono black or mono red burn, even in like the new MTG, everybody is 3 colors / 5 colors in cubing. I love taking damage to win faster, but the longer I'm playing in this Dunwich game, the more I am afraid of the random events deck. I'm very aware of how easy it is to just take little bits of chip damage that you can't avoid over time. And so Agnes to me feels like a card where I'm gonna be doing so good, and I'm gonna be doing so good, and I'm gonna be taking trades that I think is safe, but as a new player, I'm gonna end up crossing a tipping point that I'm not aware of, and then I'm just gonna get killed.
Yeah, I can see that. So generally, the Parallel Investigators, they were released as print and play on the Fantasy Flight Games website. So they're generally not like, I sometimes say they're not real, because like they're not real, they're real, but they're not real. But the big thing about them is that they're all kind of like higher complexity in terms of like what the character wants, or like how to get the character going, or just a general reimagining of the game plan that this character had. And Agnes's main character is that she takes horror and she can deal damage. So this one, she can deal damage to keep looping her spells. And it is true, you have to be very aware of when you can take damage to do your spells, but at the same time, you're going to want to do that with pretty much like every turn. There is a big help. There's a lot of things that, like, there's a lot of cool Agnes builds that I've seen, but a big tool that they have is, in the Mark deck, I have that Hallowed Mirror that can heal too. She can run an upgraded version that heals 3. So it either heals 3 and gets discarded, or it heals 2 and shuffles back into your deck. So what she does is she heals 3, but she takes a damage because it's a spell, and then she shovels it back into her deck and draws a card. So she can just loop that card like over and over and over again.
Infinitely.
It's a very fun build, but it does require like general piloting skills to not just blood magic yourself to death. Isn't that right, buddy?
Well, and it's also interesting to me because it really implies, even though I'm looping cards back into my deck, I want to be drawing spells, which means I want to build a deck that is mostly spells, or seems to be highly aggressive on spells, which I haven't touched spells yet in game.
Yes.
And so I don't know. I know they're expensive because every single card seems to be about reducing the cost of spells. So the idea of building a high-cost deck that I play off of my hit points is very appealing and very scary.
Yeah, because Agnes also, she has this thing where she's not about using the mystic asset spells that much. She's using the mystic events. She's a spell slinger, so you're playing events, putting them back into your deck, and kind of looping that.
Yeah.
And the events are generally stronger, but she has the potential to run out of resources quicker because she doesn't have stuff set in play. You definitely could, but then it's like you're losing some of the... It's okay, it's just the drain. It's just the drain draining, Russ. Did he jump? Like,
he did.
Yeah.
Oh, he's investigating.
Yeah, he's like, I need to see what that was. But then you kind of lose like the aspect of what the fantasy of the character is, the spell slinging Blood Witch. But also, Parallel Agnes also has this like thing where Agnes has one of the toughest weaknesses for new players, I think. Even for experienced players, it can kind of put you in a bind. It's a card that in regular Agnes it costs 2. In Parallel Agnes, it costs 4, and it's a spell event that you play, and it puts a doom on the agenda. And if at the end of your turn it's in your hand, you take 2 horror. So it's one of those things where like it's a very tough signature weakness. When you compare that to Stella's, which is just that if you take a test that's 4 or greater, you take a horror.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a very different kind of thing you need to be aware of.
Agnes, if she paid the 2 less, would loop it back into her deck.
Yeah, but the thing is, she can pay the 2 less, but the looping is optional. You don't need to loop it, but you can still reduce the cost by taking a damage.
Okay.
All right, let's go to number 4, which is none other than Kelvin Wright.
So I mean, I wanted to play Kelvin Wright. He's he's one of my top interesting investigators, but he also scares me because of the zeros.
Yeah.
And once again, this is a continuing theme. You're seeing a lot of like mono black mentality here, and then as I play Dunwich Horror, I'm getting more afraid of that mentality because I want it and I like playing that way. But this game really punishes you for taking missteps. And so this idea that I could build around Kelvin to have these high stats at the cost that if I fail, I might just die is terrifying.
Yeah, Kelvin is a tricky investigator, as I've told you previously. He's an investigator that we don't recommend to new players because his complexity is so high. It's actually kind of funny because Travis Byrne and I have all failed with Kelvin. We've all crashed and burned and replaced them in the middle of a campaign. I actually called off a campaign I was playing because I was like, I'm done. This Kelvin is a nightmare. But I found a Kelvin recently that actually worked, and it actually is a very similar idea to the Stella deck, where it's about bringing the shroud values down, bringing test values down, and not necessarily trying to just get your stat values to the edge. You get them to a comfortable level, but then bring things down. And so there's a bit more control into it. So it's very similar to the idea of like your Stella deck. And then also the Bless mechanic works really well for him. I just released that video last Saturday on the channel.
I'll have to take a look.
But I think Kelvin is fun. He flexes like nobody else. So like the thing is like the way we've built our decks is they're both focused more on what they're doing, right? I'm killing, you're getting clues. Kelvin works really well at doing both things as needed to flex and like a flex investigator. And it'd be very fun for us to do a flex build, but I think it definitely requires a bit more. Like I think your first one you should kind of just playing a Clover is a great way to learn the game, right? Because it's just like you learn what's important about the tempo.
A
right?
Clover.
Yeah. But I think you would enjoy Kelvin because He has a good pool of cards. He's a survivor with spirits. His ability is good, and I think there's the fun and the risk of it. You know, the risk is what makes it fun.
But I feel like if I took him as a character, what I would do is I would actually probably pull him up and then pull up his card pool at home, even before coming here and building the deck, and then I would literally just stare at him for like half an hour, and I would just be like, "Why am I doing this?"
Yeah. Why am I putting myself through this?
Yeah.
This Kelvin deck, I get that. I get it. Kelvin's tough. He was a tough nut for me to crack, but last year I had a resolution to play every investigator in a campaign, and I discovered a lot about Kelvin in that playthrough of him.
Nice.
All right, number 3 is none other than Preston Fairmont, the millionaire. One's across the board. He makes 4 money every turn to his trust fund, but he loses it at the end of each turn.
So Preston scares me because Preston is clearly about playing the game in a complex way that I don't fully understand, which is obviously relying on your assets and probably relying on like one-off or expensive events that are going to like really help you push the game and win, which in my Stella deck I have been kind of pseudo-avoiding. Like, if anything, I've been noticing as the game goes on, I don't spend enough of my money. I tend to generate too many resources and then not enough.
In all fairness, that's very common for a lot of Survivor decks.
Okay,
that's a very common thing in Survivor decks. They have an archetype that's called Dark Horse, which is it's an asset that if you have no resources, you get +1 to each of your stats. So they look to actively just waste their resources on useless stat boosts because they just have so many.
I love it.
Right, so a lot of builds, they end up just being like, I don't need it. Right. Yeah.
So Preston obviously still freaks me out because of the ones across the board and because of the flavor. But also just as a character design, I hate the ones across the board, and I hate that he gains money that then goes away. If I could bank that for every turn...
You can. It costs an action. You can move all money from your trust fund to your character card.
Okay,
but it takes one of your actions.
Which is also scary. What I meant is, like, if it wasn't action cost related, it would feel much better to me. But knowing this puts me in this weird position where I'm like, okay, I need money to win. But if I'm in a circumstance where I have extra actions to take, which seems kind of rare in this game, that's when I'd probably move the money over. Any other time, I'm reducing myself down to 2 actions. So if I'm moving it over, what am I losing in terms of opportunity cost to take actions? And if I don't move that money over and I end up really desperately needing it for some big expensive cards next turn, how bad is that going to feel? How bad is it going to feel to lose the turn after you should have saved your money?
Yeah. I can see that. I can definitely see that being a reason why Preston is a little bit spooky.
Yeah.
To give you some hype for Preston, he is a great user of the Red Glove Man.
I know, and that makes me so angry that you told me that.
He's number 2. Amanda is the best user of the Red Glove Man. Because
not Yorick, who brings him back from the graveyard?
The Yorick one's fun, but the thing is, like, Yorick's stat that he uses is his fist, which is 4, so it's only like a 1 increase.
Yeah.
But Preston is like, he goes up really high.
I
right?
see it.
Same with Amanda, because she has all 2s across the board, right?
I see it.
But yeah, no, it's menacing. But like a thing that can like to give you some insight to the money part of it. It's there's lots of ways you can go, and the most common thing is that like you can either do like hoarding. So the actions to spend the money over are worth it because you're not really using your money to spend. You're using your money to turn other actions better.
Interesting.
It's like a dragon deck where you just like get as much resources as you can, and like you want to get like 30 resources, and you can just use those to pass tests. The other version is that you look to just spend that resources every turn. So like most of your effects cap out at 4, and you're looking like playing 1 strong event each turn because there's actually a lot of cards that are designed to be paid with 4 resources to get like a good effect out of them.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about Preston. But but even then, like there's this element of him to me where I'm like, am I going to go down to 2 actions in a round where I shouldn't have?
Yeah.
Or am I going to take 3 actions in a round when I should have taken 2?
And it's also kind of menacing because his signature weakness is Lodge Debts, and it's a 10 cost event, right? So, like, if you're a poor Preston, you have to be aware that could be coming just around the corner.
I saw that too, and I was like, oh, good, so it is encouraging me to hoard more than I should.
Yeah. All right, number 2, and this one was interesting to me. This is actually an investigator from your top 5 strongest investigator picks, and that was Sister Mary.
Yes.
So what is it about Sister Mary? I'm very curious about this one.
So, again, having played a little bit of Dunwich and having looked at the scenarios and everything, and seeing what Sister Mary does, I feel like Sister Mary is... Okay, so here's what it comes down to. Sister Mary feels like a very chaotic card now to me. And it feels like a card that I can't guarantee whatever's happening is going to be good or bad for me based on what she adds to the game. So having done more draws from the poison bag.
The token, the chaos
Bag. Having drawn more
poison bag.
The poison bag. Having drawn more tokens now from the chaos bag, I can see where those tokens being blessings would feel so good. But I read how many she puts in and how many she adds to the bag, and then I read her weakness, and I'm just like, you either get this weakness on the second turn and you're like, big money, I win, or you get this weakness on like the third last turn of the game you're running and you die. Like, she just kills you. She puts you in a position where you cannot win, you cannot advance, and your statistical odds of passing any check, your team either needs to be super ahead because of where you got them with all those blessings, or your team, if they're scraping by, you've lost. You've lost the scenario.
I think ultimately that's a very fair assessment, because there's a lot of unknowns about Sister Mary. And there's a running joke that we have that sometimes blesses aren't blesses. Like, Bryn is very commonly bless into auto-fail token, because you still have to draw another token. Like, Bryn did it like 5 times in a campaign, right? It's just one of those things where, like, even though you can draw a bless, they might not mean anything.
Yeah.
The other thing is that her stat line also isn't great.
No.
Yeah, and especially now that you've played, you see like the stat lines. Stella's stat line is very similar to this, but Stella gets extra actions, right, to make up for it. Sister Mary not so much. Yeah.
And I'm reading as I'm going through the Survivor book, only the Survivor book, but I'm reading all these cards that are like, this is better if you have a blessing. And I'm like, that is really interesting. But that also means that if I build a deck around blessings and I hit that weakness, all these cards turn off. Yeah,
so the weakness one is a little bit, my cat just scratched me. All right, you want to come back? You investigated the noise and everything's A-okay. I'm glad the viewers have like a sub-story to this episode.
Yeah.
But I was talking about Crisis of Faith, right? Crisis of Faith is interesting because a lot of the time you're actually looking at sealing away your blessed tokens, taking them out of the bag and putting them on cards.
Okay.
Which means you're using them for other things than just the traditional blessed token, right? And it's one of those things that, like, it's going to hit softer than you actually think it's going to.
Okay.
There's also a weird thing that's just showing your butt to the internet, Russ. Good boy. Good boy. Look at how clean it is, Russ. You did so good. The other thing is that there's a card that it's looking like they are trying to rule that it changes differently, but there's a card called Deny Existence that it stops when you would take damage or horror, or like discard cards or lose resources, etc., etc. And you can just use it to stop the weakness. So that really mitigates that. But as I said, they might be looking at changing that. I think that you're very right, though, is that the chaos. You can't really depend on Sister Mary, and I think that's a very fair reason to kind of be intimidated by her.
Yeah.
Russ, have some decency.
Because it feels like I could build a deck, and like, obviously there's blessings are well supported, and obviously there's this big thing you can do with it. But yeah, the blessing just adds so many more, like, percentage-wise. Yeah. Okay, here's another thing. So this comes from bad banking practices, just PS, from my time as a banker for a major bank company. But there's this almost mentality sometimes in, like, a lot of more conservative banking and fiscal practices where it's like, if you have a chance of getting 0, that sucks. If you have a chance of getting +1, that's good. If you have a chance of getting -1, that's bad. But if you just add more zeros to the pot, you're actually decreasing your chance of getting the +1, without necessarily gaining any actual benefits to your circumstance. And so with the blessings, I'm like, is this really helping?
And that's actually a big thing about blessing is that unless you're like actively pulling them out or using them for other things, you can't rely on them to be your way to pass tests.
Yeah.
There are some exceptions. Mostly it's the Survivor Covenant, Ancient Covenant.
Yeah.
Which just when you draw a bless token, you just stop. That's it. So that's just like +2, right?
There's a cat tuft on.
Oh my God.
Yes.
It's got me. There we go.
Thank you.
But yeah, like it's just an Ancient Covenant and it just stops, right? It's just like that's it.
Yeah.
And like, but even then, like it's kind of the plan for that is just like unless you're doing a card that draws them, which there is a neutral card that draws specific ones out if you seal them on it, it's just random, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a big problem with System Mary, isn't it? Yeah, it is. All right, let's go to your number one. And I'm gonna just tell you right now, Eric, your number one is my number one.
Oh, nice.
Parallel Roland Banks with all of his directives and rules he needs to follow.
Okay, so first off, I don't like his stat line. I just don't. I hate that when I look through the directives, there is one directive I want.
Which one's that one?
The one that gives him +3 sanity.
Okay, yeah.
And that's not even good. Like that doesn't even benefit you that much.
Yeah.
Like it's just like oh great, I've got a slightly better stat line if I fail because I'm failing.
Yeah.
And then every single one of the other directives feels wrong. And this is just a new player's experience.
Yeah.
But I look at these assets and I look at the way that you're playing in Dunwich and you're like, I'm gonna put some damage on my assets. My assets are also designed to be there for soak. And Roland's like, have more assets. Have more ally assets, but don't soak them. And like have more of these cards, but don't play them too fast. But also I make them faster. Like everything he does seems almost contrary to the way that the game is as written. And I realize one of his powers is to turn some of that off and then like kind of boost himself forward in certain advantageous times and not.
Yeah.
But as a player, because they are restrictions on how the deck gets built sometimes, or they're restrictions on some of my actions prior to turning off a directive, it feels really intimidating to look at that and be like, how do I grind the value out of this and know when to shut it off? It's the same problem as the first character I'm afraid of.
Oh, Parallel Agnes?
Yeah.
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 Well, also it's a parallel. So as I said earlier, Parallel Roland is my most intimidating character because of the memory issues that he inevitably puts me into, where I break one of his directives eventually at least once, because I'm trying to tell jokes while I'm playing Arkham.
Yeah.
So he always gets me, and then I'm like, fuck. And like you're very right. It's very different. Like for example, the one where it's like you can't choose to put damage on your assets. What there is there's a bunch of allies that through their abilities they damage themselves, but you get a positive out of it. Yeah. So like for example, there's a card called Beat Cop, which is just exhaust it, deal a damage to itself, deal damage to an enemy at your location. That's fine, right? Yeah. So you get more ally slots, but it's like a very different idea to what I'm trying to do with my Mark Harrigan deck, which is soak and then use that soak to draw cards.
Yeah.
Right? But it is very intimidating, and I'm not surprised it's the number one because Roland Banks, as you said when we were going through, you almost put Roland Banks on your list twice because you forgot at first when you put him on, and then you were like, this guy, Roland Banks. Like, oh wait, Roland Banks.
Well, and some of these bloody, where are you?
There he is.
Some of these bloody directors are just unbelievable too, because they confuse me so much. So like, you can't play more than 2 cards each round, but something gains fast. Like, okay, I get it. I get what you're supposed to do here. But the idea that I can't play 2 cards each round, like, yeah, we haven't had a lot of situations where you've played 2 cards in a round. But I burn through cards like crazy. I play 2 cards every round. Sorry, I'm getting like hysterical here. You cannot move more than twice each round for +3 sanity. Like again, low cost because who's moving twice each round?
But actually, it's funny because certain campaigns you need to move a lot.
Fair. But so +3 sanity isn't great in my opinion. Yeah. Oh, this one, Seek the Truth. This one breaks my brain.
This one, when your collection has 1 or more clues, you cannot Commit cards to skill test unless you discover a clue this round. And then after you discover a clue, yeah. That one is for even grander minds than mine. I've seen decks like builds where it's done, and I'm still just like, that's cool. I can't do that.
Yeah.
All right, time to go.
Like, I'm always going to play with these 3 directives because Seek the Truth is terrifying to me.
I think there's one more too.
I'm like, okay, so with Seek the Truth, oh no.
Yeah, there's one more.
Oh no, there's another.
Yeah, there's 5 and you choose 3.
Yeah, you can't fight during a skill test while investigating, evading, or exhaust this directive. Okay, so I see how these 2 pair together.
Yeah.
You would take these 2 together, but they change you, they stop you from fighting, and they stop you from effectively fighting. And so you're just like this bare-knuckle brawler until you investigate your first clue, which you get on for +2, but that only puts you at 5. 5 without cards. That's terrifying.
That's actually one thing that people noted in your initial analysis when we were talking through the initial cards, and there was that they felt as though that you weren't looking at stats at first. And I think that makes total sense because you don't know the value of a skill 100%. In comparison to the game. And now you see like a 3 you have to work for, right? Like even a 4 fist. I have 5 fists with Mark, and my gun doesn't give me a boost, and I need to work for it, right? Like there's a lot of work that goes into it. But I mean, there's a lot of fun that you can do with Parallel Roland. But he definitely, I agree completely, is my personal most intimidating character. So I'm not surprised that he is also your most intimidating character.
I will say though that because he's got that smoky eyeshadow look.
Yeah.
He's got that smoky eye. I do want to play him.
But that's what regular old Roland is for.
Oh, it's the same!
Yeah, it's just the same guy. Same guy.
But yeah, no, seriously. Roland seems like so much fun to play, but he seems like you're not even really playing him as a fist guy anymore.
He is. It's a very interesting flex. But we do often say, well, I often say, that the game would be better if every investigator was like Roland Banks, because he's like the perfect balance of what a character could be and should be with strengths and weaknesses and a distinct playstyle that is like uniquely flex. And then he's just kind of like, unfortunately, kind of left in the dust by investigators with 5 fist, right? Yeah, it is. It's just how it is. All right. Well, that was another great video. I hope you at home enjoyed it. As I said at the start, if you have any ideas for what you want to see Eric and I talk about for future list videos, let me know down in the comments. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Actually, one thing that will also be fun is you looking through and like eventually when you get some more, you ranking the classes, because I'm always curious to see everybody's favorites.
I'm really excited for the episode where I figure out which hand to wave at for the camera when it opens.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Maybe that'll be the next one. We'll find out. Have a good one. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel, you can do so by liking, commenting, or joining our Patreon down in the description. And also, of course, by subscribing to our YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed. In the meantime, have a good one. We love you. And as always, a GG's. Oh, wrong hand.